Welcome back to making browser games with JavaScript, and I'm excited to be covering today how we're going to be improving our rock, paper, scissors game that we coded from the last video. Now, before I talk about how to improve it, I wanted to mention that for some reason in the last video, I kept calling the name of the game Tic-Tac-Toe. I had Tic-Tac-Toe written up here, and that was probably really confusing. I apologize for that. We were not obviously coding tic-tac-toe. And let me spell scissors right. So we're doing rock, paper, scissors, and tic-tac-toe I do plan on covering, just not until several videos later when we can eventually start adding graphics to the web page. So go ahead and if you put tic-tac-toe up here in the title, replace that with just rock, paper, scissors. And that brings me to the what we're going to do to improve the rock, paper, scissors game. So we have our script for our rock, paper, scissors game here. And when we run the game, we need to open up the console because without it, we can't play the game. If I refresh the page, I get to enter in a move here and it will give me the result over here in the console. However, I need the console to even play the game because if I close this web page is completely blank and it's kind of useless by itself. We're only really using the web page as a means of even running this game. And that's not what browser games really is. We don't want to just use JavaScript and we don't want to just use HTML just to put the JavaScript inside of it. So what I want to talk about is different ways that we can add more HTML to this web page so that we get something on this page itself. Remember from my first video, HTML, I explained it as the skeleton of the program or of the, of the website. It tells you what the website is going to consist of. The JavaScript is just the brains. And as you can tell, other than all this HTML, which by the way, if you don't remember what this stuff does, go back to the first video and just review that. But besides all this HTML here, like we're not really saying what this website's going to consist of. All we say is, hey, here's the body of the website and here's a script inside. We don't want that. So I'm going to teach a few new HTML tags today. The first one will be the paragraph tag. This is for when you want to get text on the web page. You could just get text on the web page by adding text to the body HTML tag here. And if I save that and run, we're going to get, when I cancel this, all this text here in the corner like that. Now so you could just put text on your HTML document randomly, but the better way is to use a paragraph tag like this. You use an opening angle bracket, P, closing angle bracket, and then you have some kind of content in the middle, and then you have an opening paragraph tag, /P, and then closing angle bracket, and I accidentally called this a paragraph tag. Opening angle bracket, /P, and then closing angle bracket like that. And this will define one paragraph tag. And this text is now going to render to the screen. It's probably going to look the exact same, and it pretty much does, other than I typed different random nonsense. But this is how you get text on a website, and this is kind of important because I can now leave a message like, "Thank you for playing." I just almost did it again. I almost typed tic-tac-toe. No, thank you for playing rock, paper, scissors to play again, and I'm gonna click enter just so I can keep going typing this way, and that's totally fine. To play again, refresh the page like that. I could have kept this all on one line of code here and just move this over, but I don't really feel like doing that. It's totally okay to change the lines. I'm gonna save that, refresh. Thank you for playing rock, paper, scissors to play again, refresh the page. And so now I have a message that appears after we enter the user input like this. And this is a little bit better. We have something on the web page itself instead of all just from the console. And now I want to talk about the header tag because this is nice, but I want a little bit more. The header tag is an HTML element that basically lets you make a title. If header does not mean enough to you by itself, it's basically a title. To create a header, I'm going to type H1, and I'm going to put the title in the middle. Rock, paper, scissors, game. And then slash H1 to close it. Almost all of your HTML tags here are going to have an opening and a closing one like that. I'm going to save this, and now we're going to see something interesting. We're going to see this text render on the page, but it's going to be different. I'm going to click cancel, and now the header text is 1, it's in bold, and 2, it's bigger. So it's kind of clear. This is where your eye first focuses. This is your title, and then the next thing you read is this small text here. And this is much better here. We now have an actual item on our web page here. And before I even wrap up the video, because that's really the biggest step, just adding things to our HTML or to our web page here so that it's not just in the console over here. But I want to talk about I want to give another example. So I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to add another one. So let's say I had a website with like a chocolate recipe. I don't know what a chocolate recipe would look like, but the HTML might look like this. My chocolate recipe, like that. So that's my title, and then my content is going to be a paragraph tag. Ingredient 1 would be chocolate, and I'm not really putting much thought into this recipe list like that. There you go, just some content. And if I were to run this, okay, this pop-up window is kind of getting annoying. I'll show you how to get rid of that in a second. So we have a title, we have content here, and before I even move on, I'm going to use a comment. I know I've explained comments. I'm going to use comment / to make the prompt function, which gives us our user input, ineffective. So now none of this will happen. You can tell because it's green. And I'm going to instead just set the player move to rock and end it with a semicolon. So that's another useful purpose of a comment. You can use comments to make code ineffective. And by replacing the player move with a rock, I can now refresh this page as many times as I want, and we're not going to get that annoying window. Also, let's say I wanted to have a space in between number 1 and number 2 on the ingredient list of my very made-up chocolate recipe. Well, I can simply split them into 2 paragraph elements. I can have a paragraph 1 for chocolate, and then I close that paragraph, but then I create a new one here. If I have a paragraph here and a paragraph here, then if I run the page, it separated chocolate and sugar into 2 different lines. But let's say I wanted a little bit more space in between here. Well, you might be thinking, couldn't I just have a paragraph here that's in the middle and it doesn't do anything other than create space? And that does not work in this case, but let me show you the real way of adding extra space here without CSS for those that are a little bit more advanced. You can just use the break HTML element here, break. And when I save that and run, it's going to create an extra space in between. Now you might be freaking out. Wait a minute, there was no closing break tag here like that. That's because break is an exception. You don't really put anything inside of a break, which is why you don't need a closing tag. It's just there by itself. This is one of those few HTML elements that does not require a closing element or a closing tag. You can add many of these breaks together like that. And in fact, they can all be on the same line, but the browser is going to read it the same way. If I run this, we're going to get a lot of space in between the first ingredient and the second. So right there, that concludes my video. You got basically three new HTML elements to work with. You have H1, paragraph, and then break. Oh, and actually, I did forget. You might be wondering, why is there a 1? Because H stands for header, which is like your title, but why a 1? Well, there's a 1 because that's basically specifying the size of the header, because there's an H2, there's an H3, There's an H4 all the way to H6. And I'm not going to show you all of those. If you want to see them all, you can just change these to the header that you want to use. Just know that there are headers H1 through H6, like that. And that concludes this video. We've added a lot more to the web page itself. I'm going to delete this bogus chocolate recipe example, like that. And there we go. So we got our rock, paper, scissors title here, and then a little message as well. And I don't have anything else to add on top of that. I believe the next one I'm going to talk about a little bit more HTML, and eventually, and pretty soon, we're going to be going over styling, and I'm excited to be covering that pretty soon.